He wasn't supposed to come home that early, and maybe that's why the house didn't have time to hide what it had become. The truck engine dies with a low rumble that seems too loud for a street this quiet, tires crunching over gravel that hasn't been disturbed in weeks, maybe longer, and Ethan Cole sits there for a second with both hands still on the wheel, eyes fixed on the front porch where the light should be on but isn't, where the curtains hang still like something holding its breath, and beside him Rex shifts. The German shepherd's ears rising before his body even moves, a low sound building deep in his chest, not a bark. Not yet, something older than that, something that makes Ethan's pulse slow instead of race. He exhales, grabs his duffel from the passenger seat, and pushes the door open into air that smells wrong. Not just the dry scent of late summer dust and cut grass, but something faint beneath it, sterile, like a place that doesn't belong in a home. And Rex is already out, paws hitting the ground with purpose, nose low, scanning, tracking, not greeting, not excited, and that's when Ethan feels it, that quiet shift inside his chest. The kind that doesn't announce danger, but recognizes it. The house stands the same, white paint chipped along the edges, the old wind chime still hanging near the porch, silent even though there's a breeze, and he remembers his mother sitting there in the evenings, a glass of iced tea sweating in her hand, calling his name like it was something worth waiting for. But now the porch is empty, the chairs slightly angled as if someone left in a hurry or never came back to finish sitting. "Mom," he calls, voice steady but softer than he expects. The word drifting into the stillness and falling flat against the walls. No answer coming back. Not even an echo. Rex steps onto the porch first, nails clicking against the wood, then stopping abruptly in front of the door, head tilted slightly, nose pressed close to the gap beneath it, and that low growl returns, deeper now, vibrating through the boards, and Ethan has seen that before, not in neighborhoods like this, but in places where something didn't add up, where the air held on to stories people try to bury. He reaches for the handle and pauses, just for a second, noticing the fine layer of dust along the frame, the absence of fingerprints, the way the welcome mat is slightly off-center like it's been nudged and never straightened. And when he finally turns it, the door opens too easily, swinging inward without resistance, revealing a living room that looks untouched and yet completely abandoned. Furniture exactly where it should be, but missing the warmth that makes it real, the air cooler inside, carrying that. Same faint sterile scent, like someone tried to clean something they couldn't quite erase. Rex steps in slowly, not rushing, each movement deliberate, his body low, scanning corners, pausing near the hallway that leads to the bedrooms, and Ethan follows, boots heavy on the hardwood floor, each step echoing louder than it should, his eyes catching small details that don't belong, a picture frame turned face down on the table, a glass left half full but long dried, a blanket folded too neatly across the couch as if no one had used it in weeks, and somewhere deeper in the house a door creaks softly, not from movement but from settling, from time passing without being noticed. "Mom," he calls again, louder now, but the silence that answers feels heavier, like it knows something he doesn't yet, and Rex turns his head toward the hallway, ears locked forward, then takes a step, and another, leading the way without hesitation, as if whatever truth waits in this house has already made itself known to him, and all Ethan can do is follow. The paper trembles slightly in Ethan's hand, not from fear, but from the quiet weight of recognition settling deeper than thought, and for a long moment he does not move, does not speak, just stands there, a room that no longer feels like his mother's, listening to the faint hum of the house as if it might explain itself if he waits long enough, but it does not, and Rex shifts beside him, stepping closer to the nightstand again, nose brushing the edge before turning toward the hallway with sudden intent, the kind that does not question, only knows, and Ethan folds the papers once, carefully, like they matter more than they should, and follows. The hallway feels narrower now, the light thinner, and when they step back into the living room, the silence is broken by something small, something almost forgotten, a ticking sound coming from the wall near the kitchen, the old clock still running, still marking time for someone who is no longer here. And it strikes Ethan then, the detail that does not fit, because his mother never left that clock unwound, never let anything continue without purpose. And yet here it is, steady, indifferent, as if time itself has been left behind with everything else. Rex moves past it without hesitation, heading toward the back door, stopping only long enough to glance back, waiting, and Ethan follows again, opening the door into a yard that looks maintained but not cared for, grass trimmed but uneven, edges rough where precision used to live, and the air outside feels heavier, warmer, carrying a faint scent of oil and rubber that does not belong to this place. And near the side of the house, just beyond the gravel path, Rex lowers his head again, tracking something invisible across the ground, weaving slightly, then stopping near the driveway where faint tire marks cut across the dust, not fresh, but not old enough to ignore. Ethan crouches, running his fingers along the ground, feeling the subtle grooves, the direction they lead, the way they angle toward the street, and for a second he closes his eyes, letting the pattern settle into something he understands, not as a soldier, not as a man trained to read terrain, but as a son trying to follow what remains. He stands slowly, looking toward the neighboring house, the one with the faded blue siding and the mailbox that always leaned slightly to the left, and he hesitates only a moment before walking that way. Rex already ahead of him, posture alert but controlled, not aggressive, just aware, and when Ethan steps onto the neighbor's porch, the boards creak louder than they should, announcing his presence before he even raises his hand to knock. The door opens before he can, just a few inches, revealing Mrs. Dalton, older now than he remembers, her gray hair pulled back loosely, eyes narrowing slightly before widening with recognition. And there is something in her expression that shifts too quickly to hide, something between relief and guilt. "Ethan," she says softly, his name carrying a weight that tells him she has been expecting this moment in ways she could not prepare for. And he nods once, not stepping inside, not yet. "Where is my mother?" he asks, voice steady but stripped of everything unnecessary. And Mrs. Dalton exhales slowly, glancing past him toward the house as if it might still be watching, then back to him, her voice lowering. "They came 2 weeks ago, said it was for her own good, said she signed the papers." And she pauses, eyes flicking down briefly to Rex, who stands still beside Ethan, gaze fixed on her, not threatening, just knowing. And she adds quietly, "But she did not want to go, Ethan. Not like that." The words do not land all at once. They settle in layers, and Ethan feels each one, measured, precise, like footsteps leading somewhere he cannot avoid. And for the first time since stepping onto that porch, something shifts inside him. Not anger, not yet, but a clarity that feels colder, sharper. And when he speaks again, it is quieter, more certain. "Who is they?" And Mrs. Dalton hesitates, just long enough to confirm what he already suspects, before answering with a name he has not spoken in years, a name that should have meant family, and instead now feels like the beginning of something broken. The name lingers in the space between them longer than it should, like something neither of them wants to fully acknowledge, and Ethan does not repeat it, does not react outwardly, but the way his jaw tightens, the way his shoulders settle into stillness, says enough, and Rex shifts slightly at his side, sensing the change without needing to understand the words, only the weight behind them. Mrs. Dalton steps back a little, opening the door wider as if inviting him in. But Ethan does not move, not yet, his eyes drifting past her shoulder toward the quiet interior of a house that suddenly feels too normal, too untouched by what has happened next door, and that contrast settles into him with quiet discomfort. "They said it was temporary," she continues, her voice softer now, almost apologetic, said she needed supervision, that she could not manage on her own anymore. And she pauses again, searching his face for something, maybe permission to continue, maybe forgiveness she knows she does not deserve, but she kept asking for you, Ethan, over and over, even when they were taking her things. Rex lets out a low breath at that. Not quite a sound, but enough to draw both of their attention, and he turns his head slightly toward the street, ears twitching as if catching something distant, something carried by memory rather than wind. Ethan nods once, slow, absorbing each word like it is being placed carefully into a structure he is only beginning to see. And then he steps back from the door, the decision already made somewhere beneath the surface. Which facility? He asks, voice calm, controlled, but with a steadiness that does not leave room for uncertainty. And Mrs. Dalton answers quickly this time, as if relieved to give something useful. A name followed by a location just under 30 miles away, a place Ethan has never passed, never needed to know, and now cannot ignore. The distance settles into him in a strange way, not far enough to explain absence, not close enough to excuse neglect, just enough to make everything feel deliberate. He thanks her quietly, not out of politeness, but because it is the only thing that fits, and then he turns, stepping off the porch without looking back, Rex already moving ahead, as if the path has been clear all along. The truck starts on the first turn, engine cutting through the quiet neighborhood that suddenly feels smaller, tighter, like it has been holding its breath for too long. And as Ethan pulls away, his eyes flick once toward the house in the rearview mirror, catching the stillness of it framed in glass. A place that looks intact, but no longer holds what matters. The road stretches out ahead in long, familiar lines, the kind he has driven countless times before, but today it feels different. Every mile marked by a growing clarity that replaces confusion with something sharper, something quieter, and Rex sits upright in the passenger seat, gaze fixed forward, posture steady, not restless, not uncertain, just present, as if he understands that what lies ahead is not a search, but a confrontation with something already set in motion. The late afternoon sun dips lower as they drive, casting long shadows across the highway, and the air shifts as the town gives way to open stretches of land, fields fading into tree lines that blur together in steady rhythm. And Ethan keeps one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly against the folded papers on the seat beside him, as if grounding himself in the proof of what he has already begun to uncover. He does not turn on the radio, does not fill the silence, because the silence is not empty anymore. It carries purpose now, and somewhere beneath the steady hum of the engine, beneath the rhythm of tires against asphalt, something else begins to take shape, not anger, not yet, but something steadier, something that does not rush, something that waits, just like Rex did at the door, just like he does now, moving forward not because he has all the answers, but because he no longer needs to ask the right questions to know where to go. The facility sits at the edge of a quiet two-lane road, set back behind a line of trimmed hedges that feel more like a boundary than decoration, and Ethan slows the truck as the building comes into view, a long, low structure of pale brick and wide windows that reflect the fading light without revealing much of what is inside. And for a moment, he just watches it, engine idling, as if expecting something to move behind the glass. Some sign that would make this easier to understand, but nothing does, and beside him Rex leans forward slightly, ears lifted, posture tightening in a way that tells Ethan everything he needs to know before he even steps out. The gravel crunches under his boots as he approaches the entrance, the sound too loud in the stillness, and the automatic doors slide open with a soft mechanical hum that feels out of place against the quiet weight he carries in with him, and the air inside is cool, carefully controlled, carrying that same sterile scent he noticed in the house, only stronger now, cleaner, but no less unsettling. A woman at the front desk looks up as he enters, her expression polite but practiced, the kind that has learned to manage difficult conversations without absorbing them, and she glances briefly at Rex before returning her attention to Ethan. "Can I help you?" she asks, voice even, and Ethan steps forward, placing one hand lightly on the counter, grounding himself before speaking. "I'm looking for Margaret Cole," he says, each word measured, clear, and the name seems to shift something in her expression, just enough to notice a flicker of recognition followed by something more cautious, and she types briefly into her computer, eyes scanning the screen before looking back at him. "She is here," the woman says, and then hesitates, just for a moment, as if weighing what comes next, but she has not been receiving visitors. Ethan does not react immediately, does not argue, just holds her gaze in a silence that stretches long enough to make the policy feel smaller than the reason he is standing there, and Rex steps closer to his side, still, steady, his presence filling the space between words. "I am her son," Ethan says finally, quieter now, but with a certainty that does not need to be raised, and something in that tone shifts the moment again, not breaking it, but bending it just enough, and the woman exhales softly, glancing toward a hallway that leads deeper into the building. "Room 214, she says, her voice lower now, less rehearsed, second floor, left side. And she adds, almost as an afterthought, she has been confused. The word lingers in the air, gentle but heavy, and Ethan nods once, not questioning it, not accepting it either, just placing it alongside everything else he has gathered. The hallway stretches longer than it should, lined with closed doors and quiet rooms, the faint murmur of distant voices drifting through walls that seem designed to soften everything, even truth, and as he walks, the rhythm of his steps slows, not from hesitation, but from the weight of what waits ahead, and Rex stays close, matching him stride for stride, occasionally glancing up as if checking that Ethan is still there, still moving forward. When they reach the door marked 214, Ethan stops, hand hovering just inches from the handle, and for a second the world narrows to that single point, the thin barrier between what he remembers and what he is about to face, and Rex moves first this time, stepping forward and pressing his nose gently against the door, a quiet signal, not urgent, not afraid, just certain, and Ethan inhales slowly, steadying something deep inside him, before finally turning the handle and stepping into the room, where everything that has been taken begins to take shape. The room is smaller than Ethan expected, not in size, but in presence, as if everything inside has been reduced to the bare minimum needed to exist, and the first thing he notices is the light. Thin and pale, slipping through half-drawn blinds, and settling across a figure seated near the window, still, almost too still, like someone who has learned not to expect movement from the world around them. And for a moment he has not stepped forward, does not speak, because something in his chest tightens in a way that makes even breathing feel like interruption. Rex enters first, slower than before, his usual alertness softened into something quieter, something careful, and his paws make almost no sound against the polished floor as he approaches the figure, head lowering slightly, ears no longer sharp but attentive in a different way, and when he reaches her he stops just short, waiting, as if asking permission without words. Margaret Cole sits with her hands resting loosely in her lap, fingers thin, skin pale in the afternoon light, her shoulders drawn inward beneath a simple sweater that does not quite belong to her, and her gaze is fixed somewhere beyond the window, not empty, but distant, like she is searching for something that used to be there and no longer is, and when Rex lets out a soft breath, just enough to carry his presence into the space. Her eyes shift, slowly, uncertainly, until they land on him. The change is small at first, almost invisible, a flicker in her expression, a pause in her stillness, and then her hand lifts, hesitant, as if the motion itself requires permission, and Rex steps forward that final inch, placing his head gently beneath her fingers, and the moment her skin touches his fur, something breaks open, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a door that has been closed for too long, finally giving way. Her fingers curl into his coat, trembling, and a breath escapes her lips that sounds more like memory than recognition, and she leans forward slightly, her forehead resting just above his head, eyes closing as if she has found something she did not realize she was missing. And Rex does not move, does not shift, he simply stays, absorbing the weight of that contact like it is something he was meant to carry. Ethan steps forward then, slowly, each step measured, careful not to disturb what is unfolding in front of him. And when he speaks, his voice is quieter than it has been since he arrived, stripped of everything but the need to be heard. "Mom," he says, the word gentle, almost uncertain, and for a moment there is no response, only the steady rhythm of her breathing against Rex's fur, and then she lifts her head slightly, eyes opening, searching, not with clarity, but with instinct, and they pass over him once, twice, as if trying to play something that feels familiar, but refuses to settle into certainty. "You came," she whispers finally, her voice thin but steady enough to carry the weight of something deeper, And Ethan feels that more than he hears it, the words landing in a place he has kept guarded for too long. And he nods, even though he does not know if she sees it clearly. "I am here," he answers, stepping closer now, close enough to see the lines that time has drawn across her face, the faint tremor in her hands, the way her eyes hold on to Rex more easily than they hold on to him. And that realization does not break him, not completely, but it settles into him like something he will have to learn to carry. She reaches out then, slowly, her hand leaving Rex's fur and moving toward him, stopping halfway, as if unsure of the distance. And Ethan closes it for her, taking her hand gently, careful, like it is something fragile and sacred at the same time. And for a moment they stay like that, connected not by recognition, not fully, but by something older, something that does not disappear even when memory does. And in that quiet, Rex lifts his head slightly, watching them both, not as a guard now, but as a witness, as if he understands that what is happening here is not a reunion in the way people expect, but something quieter, something harder, something that begins not with certainty, but with the simple, undeniable truth that he came back, and she is not alone. Margaret's hand remains in Ethan's, light but present, as if she is holding on to something she cannot fully see, and the room settles into a quiet that feels different now, no longer empty, but fragile, like something that could shift if touched too quickly. And Rex steps back half a pace, not leaving, just giving space, his eyes moving between them with a calm awareness that does not need instruction. Ethan lowers himself into the chair beside her, careful, slow, his movements deliberate in a way that mirrors hers. And for a while neither of them speaks, not because there is nothing to say, but because words feel too heavy for what is happening. And outside the window the light fades inch by inch, stretching shadows across the floor that seem to mark time more honestly than the clock ever could. "They told me you needed help," Ethan says finally, his voice quiet, not accusing, not yet, just placing the thought into the space between them. And Margaret's gaze drifts again, not away from him, but through him, as if the meaning arrives slower than the sound. And she nods faintly, once a small motion that carries more uncertainty than agreement. "They said I signed something," she murmurs, her voice thin but steady enough to carry the shape of the memory, and her fingers tighten slightly around his, not out of fear, but as if anchoring herself to the moment. "But I do not remember doing that." The words settle between them, soft but undeniable, and Ethan does not interrupt, does not rush to fill the silence that follows, because this is not something that needs to be corrected, it is something that needs to be understood. Rex shifts again, stepping closer to Margaret's side, lowering himself gently beside her chair, his body pressed lightly against her leg, and she responds instinctively, her free hand drifting back to rest against his head, fingers moving slowly through his fur with a familiarity that does not require memory, only feeling. And the small motion steadies her breathing, brings a quiet rhythm back into the room. "They came in the morning," she continues after a while, her eyes still distant, but her voice gaining a fragile clarity, said it would be easier, said I would not have to worry anymore. And she pauses, her brow tightening slightly, as if the thought itself resists being held. "But I did worry. I remember that. I kept thinking I forgot something important." Ethan's grip on her hand tightens just enough to be felt, not enough to startle, and he leans forward slightly, his voice lowering. "You did not forget," he says, steady, certain, and for the first time since he entered the room, her eyes meet his in a way that lingers, not fully recognizing, not fully understanding, but holding on to something that feels true, even without proof. "You were waiting," he adds, softer now, and the words seem to reach her in a different way, not as information, but as reassurance, and her shoulders ease just a little, the tension in her frame loosening as if something inside her has been set back into place, even if only partially. A quiet knock comes at the door then, gentle, hesitant, and a nurse steps in, her expression careful, respectful of the space she is entering, and she pauses when she sees them, taking in the scene without interrupting it, her eyes moving briefly to Rex before returning to Ethan. "Visiting hours are almost over," she says softly, not as a command, but as a reminder shaped by routine, and Ethan nods once, acknowledging it without accepting its weight because time feels different here, measured not by schedules but by moments that cannot be repeated. He looks back at Margaret, at the way her hand still rests against Rex, at the way her other hand remains in his, and something settles in him fully now. Not a decision, but a certainty, and when he speaks again, his voice carries that quiet resolve without needing to rise. "I'm taking her home," he says, not to the nurse, not entirely, but to the room itself, to the truth that has been building since he stepped through the front door of that empty house. And the nurse hesitates, just for a second, as if she has heard something like this before, but not quite like this. And in that pause, Rex lifts his head slightly, eyes steady, present, as if even he understands that this is the moment where something shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that cannot be undone. The nurse does not answer immediately, and that silence says more than any policy ever could, her eyes shifting briefly toward the hallway, as if weighing something beyond procedure, something human. And when she looks back at Ethan, her voice is softer, less certain. "You will need to speak with administration," she says, not as a barrier, but as a path that has been walked before. And Ethan nods once, already standing, already moving, because hesitation no longer fits the shape of what he is carrying. Margaret's hand lingers in his for a second longer before he gently releases it, careful, reassuring, and Rex rises. With him, staying close to her chair for just a moment, pressing his head lightly against her knee, as if promising something without words. And she responds again, her fingers brushing his fur in that same quiet rhythm, her eyes following him now, not with full recognition, but with enough to feel the shift, enough to understand that something is changing. The hallway feels different on the way back, shorter somehow, more direct, and the faint murmur of voices behind closed doors no longer blends in the background. It becomes part of the structure, part of the system that allowed this to happen without resistance. And Ethan walks through it with steady steps, not hurried, not aggressive, just certain, Rex matching him without needing direction. The office is small, tucked behind the front desk, and the man inside looks up as they enter, his expression composed in the way of someone who has handled difficult conversations before, papers neatly arranged in front of him, a nameplate resting at the edge of the desk that Ethan does not read, does not need to, because titles feel smaller than truth in this moment. "How can I assist you?" the man asks, polite, measured, and Ethan steps forward, placing the folded document from the house on the desk, smoothing them out with one hand as if laying down evidence rather than asking permission. "These were signed under circumstances that do not reflect her intent," he says, his voice calm, steady, but carrying a weight that does not need volume. And the man glances down, scanning the pages quickly, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly as recognition settles in. "We followed the legal documentation provided to us," he replies, carefully, choosing each word with precision, and Ethan nods once, acknowledging the structure without accepting the outcome. "Then we will correct the documentation," he answers, just as measured, and there is no confrontation in his tone, no raised voice, only the quiet certainty of someone who has already decided what is right. Rex stands beside him, still, watchful, his presence filling the space between them in a way that words cannot, and the man behind the desk exhales slowly, leaning back just slightly, as if reassessing the situation not as a process, but as a responsibility. "If there is evidence of coercion or misunderstanding, we can begin a review," he says, and the shift is small, but undeniable, a door opening not because it must, but because it should, and Ethan nods again, not pressing, not demanding, simply allowing the truth to move forward on its own weight. Minutes pass in quiet conversation, documents reviewed, forms discussed, and the structure that once felt fixed begins to adjust, not quickly, not dramatically, but enough to make space for something else, something more honest. And when Ethan steps back into the hallway again, the air feels different, lighter in a way that does not erase what has happened, but acknowledges that it does not have to continue. He returns to room 214 with the same steady pace, pushing the door open gently, and Margaret looks up this time before he speaks, her eyes finding him with a softness that was not there before, not fully clear, but closer, and Rex moves to her side immediately, his presence bridging the space between memory and reality, and Ethan steps closer, his voice quiet but certain. "We are going home," he says, and the words settle into the room like something that has been waiting to be spoken, and Margaret tilts her head slightly, as if testing the meaning, then nods once, small but sure, her hand reaching again for Rex, then for Ethan, connecting them in a way that does not require explanation, only presence. And for the first time since he arrived, the silence that follows does not feel heavy, it feels right. The night air feels different when they step outside, cooler, quieter, as if the world itself has softened to make space for what has just been reclaimed, and Ethan moves slowly, one hand steady at Margaret's side, guiding her carefully down the short path toward the truck, while Rex stays close on her other side, not leading, not guarding, but walking with a quiet purpose that feels almost sacred, and Margaret's steps are small but certain, her weight leaning slightly toward them both as if she already understands that she does not have to carry herself alone anymore. The engine starts with a low hum, familiar and grounding, and as Ethan pulls onto the road, the building behind them fades into the dark, its windows reflecting nothing now, just another place left behind, and inside the truck the silence is not empty. It is full, filled with something steady, something that does not need to be spoken to be understood, and Margaret sits between them, her hands resting lightly, one against Rex's fur, the other on the seat beside Ethan, as if anchoring herself to both of them at once. The drive feels shorter this time, the road stretching ahead under a sky that has shifted into deep blue, scattered with faint stars that flicker quietly above the tree line, and the rhythm of the tires against asphalt becomes something softer, almost like breathing, and Ethan glances over once, just once, watching the way his mother's eyes drift toward the window, not lost, not searching, just present. And when she speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper, but it carries something that settles deep. "It feels familiar," she says, not asking, not confirming, just noticing, and Ethan nods, even though she may not see it clearly, his voice steady when he answers. "It is home." The word hangs there for a moment, simple, unforced, and Margaret repeats it quietly, as if testing how it feels home. And the second time it sounds less uncertain, like something remembered rather than imagined. When they pull into the driveway, the house stands as it did before, unchanged on the outside, but the air around it feels different now, less hollow, less waiting, and Ethan steps out first, moving around to help her again, slower this time, more patient, and Rex hops down beside her, staying close as she looks toward the porch, her gaze lingering there, as if something inside her recognizes it before her mind can name it. The door opens with the same soft creak, the same familiar sound that once felt empty, but now carries something else, something returning, and as they step inside, the house seems to breathe differently, not because anything has changed physically, but because someone who belongs here has crossed the threshold again. Margaret pauses in the living room, her eyes moving slowly across the space, taking in the small details, the shapes, the shadows, and she does not rush, does not force recognition. She simply stands there, allowing the place to meet her where she is, and Rex moves ahead, settling near the couch, watching quietly, his presence steady, grounding the moment. Ethan sets the papers down on the table without looking at them, because they no longer carry the same weight, and he turns back to her, giving her time, giving her space, and after a while she takes a few steps forward, her hand brushing lightly against the back of the chair on the porch side, the same chair that had been left at an angle, and she straightens it without thinking, a small motion, almost invisible, but it lands heavier than anything else because it is not memory, it is instinct, it is belonging. She sits down slowly, looking out toward the darkened yard, and Rex comes to rest at her feet, his head lowering gently onto the floor, and Ethan stands just inside the doorway, watching them both, not saying anything, not needing to, because in this quiet, in this stillness, everything that needed to be said has already been answered, not with words, not with proof, but with presence. And as the night settles fully around the house, there is no longer a sense of something missing, only the quiet, Steady truth that some things are not restored all at once. They're returned piece by piece, breath by breath, until what was broken no longer feels empty, just held, just home. In this deeply emotional cinematic journey, a U.S. Marine returns home with his loyal German Shepherd only to uncover a quiet betrayal that changed everything he once knew about family, trust, and belonging. What begins as a simple homecoming turns into one of the most powerful animal stories about loyalty and truth. As the soldier and his K9 companion discover that his elderly mother has been taken away under circumstances that do not feel right, leaving behind a house that still stands but no longer feels lived in, guided by instinct and an unspoken bond, the K9 senses what humans cannot, leading the Marine step by step toward a hidden truth buried beneath paperwork and silence. Unfolding one of those unforgettable animal stories where a dog becomes more than a companion, becoming a witness to injustice and a bridge back to love. As the Marine tracks down his mother in a distant care facility, he is faced with a painful reality, her memory fragile, her presence diminished. Yet her connection to the dog remains unbroken, proving once again why the most powerful animal stories are not about words but about presence, touch, and the quiet language of loyalty. Through calm determination rather than confrontation, the Marine uncovers the truth behind her removal, navigating systems and decisions made without heart, restoring dignity not through force but through resolve, a theme that resonates deeply within meaningful animal stories that focus on grace instead of revenge. When he finally brings her home, the story softens into something rare and real, not a dramatic victory, but a quiet restoration, where small gestures like a hand resting on fur or a chair being straightened carry more meaning than anything spoken, reminding us that the best animal stories are not about saving the world, but about saving one soul at a time. This powerful narrative of a soldier, his devoted K9, and a mother finding her way back to familiarity captures the essence of emotional storytelling rooted in faith, loyalty, and the belief that even in silence, love finds its way home, making it one of those unforgettable animal stories that stay with you long after the final moment fades. Character 2. A full-body German Shepherd dog, adult age, strong muscular build, sable black and tan coat. Alert ears, intelligent amber eyes, standing posture, front view, natural lighting, highly realistic fur texture, no CGI, no illustration, no cartoon, cinematic realism style.